Throughout history, some plane crashes have been recorded by cameras. Not filmed with any camera. Think back to the last few years. So much has changed in our lives, in technology, and in the world, hasn't it? But there is one question that has remained unchanged for 12 years, hanging in the air like an unanswered echo. What happened to the missing Malaysia Airlines plane? Today, in this video, we will examine one of the greatest mysteries in aviation history, MH370, from every angle. We will voice the most extreme conspiracy theories, and while doing so, we will completely redefine the word impossible in our minds. What happened to Flight MH370? Ikinaidua Lost Facts. March 8, 2014. Kuala Lumpur, the capital of Malaysia. The time is 0:35 a.m. A magnificent Boeing 777 was preparing to take off for a routine flight to Beijing. If everything went according to plan, Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 would land in the Chinese capital 5 hours and 24 minutes later, carrying its 227 passengers and 12 crew members into a new morning. That night, this flight was just an ordinary part of daily life. Business trips, family visits, perhaps the excitement of a new beginning. No one knew that this routine flight would be the first step into the most mind-boggling aviation puzzle of all time. In the captain's seat was Zahari Ahmad Shah, an experienced pilot with over 18,000 hours of flight experience. Beside him was the young first officer, Farik Abdul Hamid, who had been with the company for 7 years and had 2,700 hours of flight experience. Both were among the most trusted names at Malaysia Airlines. The aircraft was an 11-year-old Boeing 777, a model that was living its golden age at the time, breaking safety records with no history of major malfunctions. In theory, everything was perfect. At 0:42 a.m., taking off from Kuala Lumpur, MH370 reported to air traffic control that it had reached an altitude of 18,000 feet. Everything was as it should be. The plane was cruising calmly on its planned route over the South China Sea. At 1:06 a.m., it sent its final automated position report. The last verbal communication anyone in the outside world would receive from anyone on board occurred at 1:18 a.m. The Kuala Lumpur air traffic controller called out to MH370 as it entered Vietnamese airspace, reminding them to contact Ho Chi Minh City. And then came those final 7 words from the plane: "Good night, Malaysian 370." That expression was the final connection between MH370 and the world. Just 3 minutes later, at 1:21 a.m., with no cloud formations, no signs of storms or fog in the sky, MH370 suddenly vanished from all radar screens in both Malaysia and Vietnam. The transponder on the plane, which responds to outside radio signals, was no longer functioning. This sudden silence, which could not be explained by a technical failure or a natural disaster, brought only one possibility to mind. Someone on the plane had intentionally turned these devices off. In an instant, a Boeing 777 full of 239 people literally evaporated before the eyes of the modern world's most advanced radar systems. Subscribe for more content like this. Search teams initially focused on the area between the South China Sea and the Gulf of Thailand, where the plane first disappeared. However, before long, the truth emerged. After vanishing, the plane had deviated from its route, making a sharp turn first to the right and then suddenly to the left, beginning to fly in a jagged path toward the Malay Peninsula. What did this mean? An escape from an emergency? Or were these the maneuvers of someone who had taken control? At 1:52 a.m., it veered right and passed through the Strait of Malacca. The last confirmed position of MH370 was at 2:22 a.m., at the very edge of military radar range. When the Malaysian government officially announced that all communication with the aircraft had been lost, the most expensive search and rescue operation in history began. The area was scanned in great detail, but not a single trace of MH370 was found. Why? Because they did not know that during this time, MH370 was still flying and was not at the location where it was being sought. It would later be taken into account that MH370 was equipped with satellite communication devices. Before takeoff, the satellite data unit on the plane had linked with a station in Perth, Australia. Throughout the night, the satellite sent hourly status requests to the plane's communication system. Although these signals did not contain direct information about the plane's location, researchers measured the distance between the aircraft and the satellite. Through this, 7 possible arcs were created, believed to be the source of the 7 signals received. According to the flight path analysis conducted by considering fuel consumption, speed, and other factors, the most likely source of the final signal had to be somewhere along this arc in the southern Indian Ocean. In other words, it was seen that it had flown for more than 5 hours on this route, had been in the air for exactly 7 hours and 38 minutes, and was somewhere on this arc. The search area was redefined by also taking ocean current estimates into account. However, the southern parts of the Indian Ocean were so remote that it took 6 days for the teams just to arrive there. The plane had been flying for 7 hours and 38 minutes from the start and had only 5.5 hours of fuel. Most likely it had run out of fuel. But what if someone had allowed the plane to glide for an extra 200 kilometers even after the fuel ran out? According to this information, the plane must have crashed somewhere in the Indian Ocean between 8:19 and 9:15 in the morning. But where? Furthermore, 2 attempts had been made that night to connect to the plane via satellite phone. The cockpit of the plane was called via satellite at 2:39, but no one answered the ringing phone. About 5 hours later, at 7:13 in the morning, another phone call could be made to the plane. This too remained unanswered. Who was calling? What did they want to learn? And why did no one answer? What was happening? International sea and air fleets scoured this 4.5 million square kilometer ocean area from top to bottom. This was an area larger than the surface area of the country of India. However, not even a trace of the plane could be found. MH370 was equipped with 2 black boxes serving as position indicators that would allow it to be found underwater. However, their battery life was 40 days, and as this period was nearing its end, signals emitting vibrations and frequencies came from a depth of about 3,000 meters. Upon this, a diving machine scanned the seabed for weeks, but no wreckage was encountered. Nothing had been found in the year following the disappearance of the plane. However, on July 29, 2015, a group of people cleaning the beach on the East African island of Madagascar found an object 2 meters long covered in mussels. As a result of the detailed examination of the dates and serial numbers on the inner part of the piece, it was confirmed that this was MH370. This piece was a flaperon, which serves as a control function on the wing of the aircraft. This piece must have hit the ocean vertically without opening in the air and slowing down. This indicated that the plane did not make a control glide, but went into a free fall from the very top to the bottom. 31 more pieces thought to be related to the plane were found. No signs of explosion or burns were found in the tested remains. On January the 17th, 2017, almost 3 years had passed since the disappearance of the plane when the search efforts were stopped. The works cost $155 million. Well, the main question that needs to be asked at this point is this: how can such an advanced plane in the heart of modern technology disappear from sight for 7 hours and vanish without leaving any trace? It is this question that makes us think of conspiracy theories. American intelligence officials attributed the failure of MH370's transponder to work when it first disappeared from radar screens to someone in the cockpit intentionally turning off this device? Well, could the cabin crew have hijacked the plane? Many theories were put forward about Captain Pilot Zahari. However, there was no criminal element. Some theorists, on the other hand, suggest that the flight attendants might have fainted due to the decrease in cabin pressure. For example, in 2005, a plane in Greece failed to maintain cabin pressure. Both pilots lost consciousness, but the plane flew on autopilot for more than 2 hours until it ran out of fuel. MH370 also traveled in a straight line, and if this is the case, everyone on the plane remained unconscious for hours until the plane crashed into the ocean. But what about a different scenario? What about North Korea? Could North Korea, for some reason, have forced Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, a Boeing 777, to land somewhere in its own territory along with the passengers inside? Even if this sounds impossible, there are similar examples in history. In 1969, a plane taking off from South Korea was hijacked by a North Korean agent. The plane was diverted to North Korea and landed at an airbase near Pyongyang. Of the 51 people on board, 39 were released, but 11 passengers remained in North Korea, and their fate is still unknown today. Even today, the return of these 11 people is brought to the agenda by the United Nations. In the 1970s and 80s, North Korea also kidnapped 17 people from Japan through different means. According to the United Nations, the number of people North Korea has kidnapped to date is at least 275. Well, why were the 11 people on the hijacked plane not released? What were their characteristics? Is North Korea really performing experiments on people, or is it training its agents with people kidnapped from different cultures? Could this be the secret behind the disappearance of a Boeing 777 full of people? Although the final position calculated via satellite signals is far from North Korea, the plane had enough fuel to reach North Korea. The pieces found on the shores of the Indian Ocean could also be explained in this type of scenario. We generally know the route the plane flew, but despite 12 years having passed, let alone finding the wreckage of the plane, we don't even know what happened to it. Whichever theory in the video you believe in, they all arouse certain suspicions. And if not knowing the answer to the question of what happened to the plane disturbs you this much, imagine what the families and relatives of the passengers feel. All these technical data, satellite signals, maps, and theories, they all go so far. Now, for a brief moment, put yourself in their shoes. If you also had a loved one on that plane and you couldn't even say goodbye, what would you want to say to them one last time? Maybe a simple, "I love you," maybe a sentence of farewell. A person's greatest helplessness is waiting forever for someone they couldn't say goodbye to. Share this with me in the comments, because until this mystery is solved, we will continue to keep the memories of those people alive. If you want me to continue with these kinds of files, chasing the truth and asking questions, you can support me by subscribing to my channel. See you in our new files in other mysterious cases. Goodbye for now.